want to welcome also those who will be joining us via YouTube whenever you see this video. This is the Morehead Church of Christ Wednesday evening Bible study, and we are studying through the book of Judges. And we are in the last part of the book. There's only 21 chapters. Tonight we'll be starting chapter 20. And you'll recall that I've made statements about this book that the period of the Judges was considered like the dark ages of Israel. In other words, it's not such a great time in Israel's history. And while we are encouraged by the judges themselves for the most part, what we see in this book is a lot of spiritual apathy and dysfunction. What we see is a nation that is far from what it used to be, and yet it has so much potential if it only just sort of be committed to God. And you'll recall that we've, in chapter 17, we are starting what was called appendices. And these are really that supplemental material, those last 5 chapters, that the author has put on there that somewhere fits in between all the judges we've already covered. The author is not concerned, like a lot of Bible writers, about chronology. That's what makes us, kind of drives us crazy as modern people. We like chronology, we want everything in order, but Bible writers are not really that concerned about chronology as so much as sort of being thorough and really giving us what they believe is important information. So where this material fits, we don't know, but it certainly fits sometime between the judges themselves. And so we're going to begin chapter 20. And as we do, some of this material seems like, we think about how relevant it is. And so if we look at it from the standpoint of Israel, and we know that there's spiritual dysfunction, we know that they're not as committed as they should be, we know they're involved with practices, as the writer tends to show us, in terms of idolatry. The first example there with Micah, and now we're looking at the gross immorality that's a nation. All of these things could be true of the Lord's church today, unless the church is committed to God and committed to really what He has revealed for us. This nation, Israel, did not have to go through this period, but they just sort of got apathetic about what God had said to them. That's why they started getting involved with idolatry. They weren't committed to the true God. They weren't committed to what God told them. And so they just sort of drifted away. And as the common phrase that we hear in this book is that every man did what was right in his own eyes. And so that might have been just sort of doing some of what God wanted and some of what they wanted to do, or just what they wanted to do, despite really what God wanted them to do. So, Judges chapter 20, as well as chapter 21, are the aftermath of the events that took place in chapter 19. And in chapter 20, we have here the response of the entire nation of Israel to the gross injustice that was perpetrated by certain men in Gibeah of Benjamin against their own countrymen, a Levite, passing through Gibeah and remaining overnight on his return trip to the hill country of Ephraim. And so there is going to be a consequence for what took place that night. You'll recall that his concubine was viciously raped to death. She died. He takes her home, cuts her up in 12 pieces, sends a piece to each one of the different tribes as sort of a rallying call to bring them together for justice. And so that's where we sort of pick up here in verse 1 of chapter 20. So we're going to read verses 1 through 7. So if there's somebody who'd like to volunteer to read, Ryan, if you want to read those first 7 verses, we'll go from there.
Then all the sons of Israel from Dan to Beersheba, including the land of Gilead, came out, and the congregation assembled as one man to the Lord at Mizpah. The chiefs of all the people, even of all the tribes of Israel, took their stand in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000-foot soldiers who drew the sword. Now the sons of Benjamin heard that the sons of Israel had gone up to Mizpah, and the sons of Israel said, "Tell us, how did this wickedness take place. So the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, I came with my concubine to spend the night at Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. But the men of Gibeah rose up against me and surrounded the house at night because of me. They intended to kill me. Instead, they ravished my concubine so that she died. And I took hold of my concubine and cut her in pieces and sent her throughout the land of Israel's inheritance, for they have committed a lewd and disgraceful act in Israel. Behold, all you sons of Israel, give your advice and counsel here.
Okay, so the Levite cut up his concubine, sent these 12 pieces out with a messenger. The extent of the message we don't know, but essentially it seems to be that it was a great injustice. Each one of these tribes would have received a part of this woman's body, and it was something that would have been quite shocking. People were shocked by it because it really never happened before. And the Levite is doing this because he believes he has suffered a great injustice, which he has. It's kind of surprising, but not in light of this book, that they're not really coming after him for showing, desecrating this body, this woman's body, and sending it to these different places. It just shows a very little regard for somebody he should have loved if it was his wife. And instead of giving her a decent burial and just mourning for her loss, this is sort of what he decides to do. And from his standpoint, he seemed to know what he was doing. He seemed to get the reaction that he wanted to have. And so here we are.
Well, it seemed like the grandfather and the husband be in trouble too, because they sent her out there, that's supposed to be his wife,
Right.
And
the old man it was really the old man that sort of
yeah, but he's her
negotiated.
husband too. The husband's over the wife, so the husband has
Yeah. Well,
authority.
the old man, he stayed with the old man, and the Levite essentially never said, "Hey, no, we're not doing that." He sort of allowed the old man to sort of.
Yeah, but
talk
what
to
I'm
him.
saying, he should have stood up to him because he's over the wife.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
husband's
I mean,
wife.
he should have never made that kind
protected
of offer.
the wife's interests. Yes.
Yeah, he should have never made that, because he was going to put his own daughter out there and the wife of the Levite, and it just should have never happened. So we've talked about that the
So
last
he should be
time.
in trouble. Both of them should be in trouble, actually.
Yeah, and that's the sad part about it. So as much as we get disgusted about what happened to this woman, and all this, and everybody's sort of enraged about that, very little is about what these men, the old man and the Levite himself and all that, really their part in it. And that's, for us, is sad, but it seems typical. I mean, if the author of the book of Judges is trying to show us moral dysfunction, he's doing a pretty good job, because we're only somewhat concerned about some sort of immoral behavior, but not really all of it. So we're looking at this. It says in verse 1, then all the sons of Israel from Dan to Beersheba, including the land of Gilead, came out. And this is interesting to note, because Dan is that place, remember, that's that colony they started from the tribe of Dan. And that is considered the most northern frontier of Israel. And Beersheba is considered the southern extremity or of the promised land. So from north to south, as well as the land of Gilead. Gilead is the land on the east side of the is on the east side of the what river is that? The River Jordan. So they're on the east side. So that's Reuben and Gad and West Manasseh on that side. So really talking about the whole of God's people. They assembled together as one man to the Lord at Mizpah. And so the idea of as one man, the author is going to use this repeatedly. And I think the reason why the author uses it, because they've never assembled like this before, in light of all of the times they were oppressed and they had judges. It seemed like the response was always regional. If we have this Canaanite enemy, we've got a couple tribes rising up with a judge and they conquer the people. But we have really the whole nation sort of coming together to deal with this problem. So this is probably why he uses this phrase, the idea is one man, the idea they're united in dealing with what has to happen here. So they're meeting at Mizpah, which is also in the territory of Benjamin. And it says, verse 2, the chiefs of all the people, even all the tribes of Israel, took their stand in the assembly of the people of God. And so the chiefs would be sort of the leaders of the tribe. And so, I mean, this is a pretty big deal. So we're talking about representation of each one of the tribes. And you'll see that they amassed 400 soldiers because they recognize that a military action may have to be taken. As we read through the text, there's going to be the demand to hand the bad guys over, and the idea is what if they don't turn the bad guys over? Well, there's going to be a military response. So verse 3, New American Standard, we have the first part of it in parentheses, and so it's a parenthetical statement made by the author of the book of Judges to indicate that while all the sons of Israel had gathered together at Mizpah, representing the whole of Israel, it's clear from the author's own words that he means the majority of tribes, but not every single tribe, since the tribe of Benjamin in the parenthetical statement, along with supporting evidence of verse 13, is not present at Mizpah. In other words, the tribe that has the bad guys involved, they're not there. And so it says, verse 3, now the sons of Benjamin heard that the sons of Israel had gone up to Mizpah, and the sons of Israel said, tell us, how did this wickedness take place? They're saying this to the Levite, okay? And so we think about what exactly they were told when each one of them received a piece of this woman's body. What exactly were they told? They were really sort of given this shocking piece of this woman's body. You can sort of imagine sort of maybe the smell and the look of it and whatever, the idea that people were just shocked by it. And, it sort of outraged everybody who saw it. And so now there's going to be some kind of explanation that's going to have to be given by the Levite.
I may be wrong, but where they're asking how did this happen, the questions of Israel. These are men of Israel, men of God. So,
right.
Why did this nasty, stuff happen and this woman's body being
right. Yeah,
cut up and all
right.
that?
So why did they start with the Levite and say, why did you cut up this woman's body? We're going to get to the other part about what this means, but it's sort of like we're just sort of looking past that. And they're shocked by it, but nobody is like appalled and like saying this is just outrageous and totally unacceptable. Who does this? So they're already sort of beyond that. And the fact that she's a concubine, which would be considered a second-class wife, the idea is her value in their estimation would be, very little compared to a regular wife. Maybe it would have been a different thing, but it's just the unfortunate circumstances that has happened here. And so we're outraged about that. They're outraged about what the Levite's going to tell them. So in verse 4 it says, the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered, said, I came with my concubine to spend a night at Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. So now we're going to have the Levite explain what happened in verses 4 and 5, the lurid details about the dreadful experience that he and those with him had the night they spent in Gibeah on the return trip. And so he goes through the details for us. Then he continues in verse 5, he says, but the men of Gibeah rose up against me and surrounded the house at night because of me. They intended to kill me. Instead, they ravished my concubine so that she died. And so the men of Gibeah in this statement is sort of used in general, but obviously we're talking about those certain worthless fellows that have been mentioned earlier in 19 and verse 22. In other words, it's not all the men, but these evil men that were from Gibeah. Go ahead.
Why does he call her his concubine? Why didn't he just call her his wife?
Yeah, well, I think when we look back at 19, he actually, at the beginning, let's see, somewhere it says about his, let's see, about his wife. He does use the word wife somewhere, but I can't remember. But as the author writes this, so it's the author of this book, not necessarily, well, the Levite, if he's saying it does that, it seems to be just the sort of the designation. The wife is really, the idea is has more of the privilege and status as a wife, or the concubine. So I explained this, I think, last time, is like a second-class wife. In other words, if you come from a lower social class and you marry into a higher social class, you essentially retain that lower social class status, and that's why you become a concubine. You're a wife, but you're a concubine, you're a second-class wife, versus a wife that may have the same status as her husband. Now, we may not like how that was, but that's how it was. That's how they dealt with it, Brother Ernest.
Now, my question is on the same line, because how when I've been teaching, talking about concubines.
Yeah.
Is it a girlfriend compared to like common law? Like it's not official,
Yeah.
but you're with them?
Well, they're actually a wife, and I have a little bit more information about it here. So, like, and this is from Baker's Evangelical Dictionary of Biblical Theology. It says a female slave who functioned as a secondary wife and a surrogate mother. So essentially, if she had children, it would be really for the benefit of the primary wife. It says concubines are mentioned primarily in early Israelite history during the patriarchal times, the period of the judges, and the early monarchy. Although some later kings had concubines, while concubines did not have the same status as wives, they were not to be mistreated. The sons of some concubines were treated as co-heirs with the sons of wives. And it says here, the practice of taking concubines as a wife was used to provide a male heir for a barren wife. Okay, so they would say this would be about, remember Sarah, Abraham and Sarah, and he takes Hagar. Hagar would have been taken as a wife and been a concubine. Okay, and then she would have had a child, and that child would have been a benefit for the childless wife and would be an heir to the family. It says, in addition, the practice provided a social safety net for poor families who could sell their daughters in dire times. This was allowed for Exodus 21, 7 through 10, and Judges 19 and verse 1. And so, you know, when the family got really poor, they could sell their daughters to be concubines. It says, multiplying children through concubines would not normally complicate the inheritance lines, but would increase the available family workforce and the family wealth. So they're just sort of like a second-rate wife is what they are. If we look at Hagar in relation to Abraham, using that example, you know, she was kind of a secondary wife. In other words, he didn't marry her necessarily for her. I mean, like he did Sarah. It's just the fact that he married her so that she could bear him a child. And so the circumstances are different, and yet they sort of have a wife status, because going back to chapter 19 of Judges, it says, verse 3, it says, and her husband arose and went after her, talking about the concubine. So she is a wife, but she does not have the same status as what we'd say the wife that he had before the concubine. In other words, this is to benefit the family in some way by taking her as a wife. And remember, they could have multiple wives. So we're talking about what's that?
Polygamy.
Polygamy. There you go. We got the wrong word. Brother Ricky, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I want to get back to the beating path. We're going to go from being passed back to the subject where they're having a hearing and stuff. I know that people are evil that raped the woman and stuff, but you know, the old man had set up, you know, this prior to that ever happening. You know, he had made a deal that he wanted to make that place, a place for people, travelers coming through there
Yeah.
to have sex. So he's the culprit of this problem,
Well, I don't think, but I'm saying I think you're reading too much into the text. His job as an Israelite was to offer hospitality. He came on the field, somebody there in Gibeah should have already taken the Levite as servant and the concubine into the house. Nobody did. So the old man says, hey, let me take you into my house. So they're enjoying fellowship with each other, having a meal together, and that men of the city go bang, 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 bang. And they're demanding that the old man put the Levite out. They're not interested in the concubine, they're interested in the Levite.
Yeah.
And so the old man says, hey, don't do this. Here's what we'll do. I'll give you my virgin daughter and the man's concubine. And you just leave.
But he
Yeah.
had to know him sending her daughter out to what 4, 5, 6, 7 men that was she
All
was gonna
kinds
get-
of men.
Huh?
Yeah, well, it seems
Well,
like
it was more than
multiple.
one.
Yeah, multiple
and
men.
So he had to know that something bad was going to happen.
Yeah, well, he
Because-
obviously knew that.
So
Yeah,
obviously, he was in the wrong,
Yeah.
letting that happen.
Right.
And stuff. So he could, he's the cause of this problem. you
right.
know.
Well, he bore his share of the guilt. Right. So because the Levite bears guilt because he should have said to the old man, listen, we're not putting my wife out there, and I'm not going to let you put my daughter out there. So they all have, they all have their share of guilt. But here's the thing, Brother Ricky, is that what's happened here is there's a lot of things that are going on that aren't right. And about the only thing that everybody can sort of agree on is, and if they even know about the old man and what he said and what was offered, but all they know is that, this woman was died, that the Levite said they were going to essentially kill me, but instead they killed my Levite. Did they not get all the details or whatever? We've just got to recognize that they're all sort of guilty, but that's not the focus of what's happening here with all these tribes together. That part is just not part of the focus. So we're already admitting that
The focus is they're not following God's rules.
Right.
And
So there's a
stuff,
lot of spiritual dysfunction, a lot of moral dysfunction, and so we're just sort of focusing on the part that the Levite wants them to focus on. But Timothy.
Yeah, just want to, although we know that people are acting based on what they feel is right. If we look, I'm just thinking anyway.
Yeah.
You see that it's like the lever actually had a plan all along to actually, maybe he actually knew that if something went wrong, this is going to be the end result at the later end. Because for me, being in the house of the old man, when the old man actually forces or pushes the concubine out,
Yeah.
he didn't say anything. He
Yeah.
just allowed it. For me, as a man, how can somebody, maybe a stranger, just push your wife out of the house and
Right.
you remain there?
Right.
And you were able to go to bed. And even
Right.
in the morning, you didn't even wake up and let me go and search for her. You prepared, you were not leaving
Sickening.
Yeah.
before you find your wife
Right,
at the door.
right. And
So
I think-
it's like he had a plan. Then, apart from that, he went home.
Yeah.
Somebody you claim to have loved,
Yeah.
you have that no fear of God in you, being a
Yeah.
believer, you were able to muster courage, and you butchered a human
Yeah.
being like you.
Yeah.
You mutilated her, and
Yeah.
you decided to send her body to different. That means he had a plan
Right.
all along. And to talk about even this, if he's doing this because of even the wife, it would have been better. But you see that he was doing all this not because he wants justice for the wife. He felt he has been treated unfairly.
Yeah.
He's looking for justice for himself, not
For himself. Yeah.
because
For himself. I think
Yeah,
that's the
that
key
is-
thing. Not
that's
for.
not the everything. So I was
Right. He looks at it as an injustice to himself instead of saying, this is an injustice done to my wife. And what
Yeah.
makes it bad is the old man is offering his daughter and the concubine, the man's concubine. Why is the Levite saying, wait a minute, we're not doing this. You're not offering my concubine, and you're certainly not going to put your daughter out there. I'm gonna prevent that from happening. But he doesn't do that. And so, we look at this, and that's the real bad part of it. And how much of these did the tribes actually know when they're told? All he said was they were intending to do this to me, but instead they did this to my wife. In other words, how many of the details didn't come out? The actual details of what happened. It's sort of, we're telling a version of the events that are designed to sort of make him look like the victim.
They're skipping the crime and
yeah.
justifying their own
So
selves.
this is what drives us
Sad,
crazy
sad.
when we're reading it, because the focus always going to be about the fact of the injustice done to the Levite. That's how it's being portrayed. So you guys committed an injustice against this man, and this is how the entire story is going to unfold. It's all about.
That's how dumb they are.
Yeah.
Because the Levites should be in trouble as well.
Yeah.
Both of them, because they both deserve
Right,
death.
right.
According
But
to the
here-
law back then.
Right. So how much of that information did they know about that night? In other words, we don't hear them saying, you know, they came, we were minding our business, having supper, Minnesota came in the door, you know, and they wanted me, but the old man, said, no, you can have my virgin daughter, and the man's concubine, and then he just took my concubine and shoved her out there. That never gets stated in this. So I don't know if, I'm saying they only know part of the story, and it's just really designed to make the Levite look like the victim. So,
surely the judge isn't as stupid as what the other people think they're getting by with.
Yeah.
It's telling us.
well, I mean, if somebody tells you a story and they tell you only selective pieces of the story so as to make themselves look like the victim, it doesn't necessarily make the other people that aren't getting all the facts stupid. It just shows you that we have somebody that's manipulating the facts to sort of mislead them in a way
Off the
that he can
subject.
get what he wants them to do. In other words,
yeah.
they're the one he wants to use to extract justice against the men of Gibeah. So, but anyway, let's come back to the text here. We're looking at this, and we're in verse 5 there, and the idea, he tells the story, they intended to kill me, so this is where we're telling, he says, they ravaged my concubine so that she died. Okay, verse 6. And I took a hold of my concubine and cut her in pieces. This is where we'd be like, wait a minute, why did you do this? Okay, you cut her in pieces and sent her throughout the land of Israel's inheritance, for they have committed a lewd and disgraceful act in Israel. Well, this would be a very disgraceful act too, because you're disrespecting the body of this woman who is your wife. But again, that's not the concern here. They're not concerned about, they're shocked by what they saw, but they really have no concern about his action, what he did. They're only concerned about
They're
what
incriminating
brought him
themselves.
this.
For
So,
sure.
verse 6, the Levite explains essentially how the body of his concubine came to be dismembered and sent throughout the land. It certainly accomplished everything that the Levite had hoped by bringing all of the nation together. Again, we would, with what the Levite's part here in cutting up his deceased concubine, we would put this under certainly every man doing what was right in his own eyes. I mean, this is really fits right in with that. So verse 7 says, behold, all you sons of Israel, give your advice and counsel here. What is he advocating here in verse 7? Behold, all you sons of Israel, give your advice and counsel here. Now that you've heard the facts.
As a form of justice,
Okay.
like coming up with ideas on what he should do to get justice.
Now you've heard this great injustice done to me. What do you think we should do? Let's go after them. Let's bring them to justice. He says, the NIV says, for this verse says, now all you Israelites speak up and tell me what you have decided to do. In other words, this guy seems to know what he's doing. I mean, I think about the idea of the shock value and the idea of bringing people together and essentially being able to get the entire tribe stirred up by what you're presenting to them, instead of them really stopping and sort of thinking about, let's start with the first part, like why you cut this woman up, why you sent her to. So that'll drive
Well,
us
they're
crazy.
incriminating themselves without even realizing that they're incriminating themselves and stuff. So
Yeah, it's unfortunate. So we're going to read verses 8 through 11. And Jenna, you want to read that for us, please?
Then all the people arose as one man, saying, not one of us will go to his tent, nor will any of us return to his house. Now this is the thing which we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot, and we will take 10 men out of 100 throughout the tribes of
All right, very good. So we have the Levite asking him essentially at the end of verse 7, what shall we do? Verse 8, then all of the people rose as one man. The idea they're united, saying, not one of us will go to his tent. So they had left their homes. They came to Mizpah. They set up a tent there while they're figuring out what's going on, what to do. They're not going to go back to their temporary home. They're not going to go back to their permanent home. Essentially, something needs to be done here. We're going to take action before any of us returns back to either our tent or our home. Justice essentially must be served. Justice cannot wait. We've got to do something here. So he is going to get the results for himself, the Levite, of what he's looking at. And then it says, verse 9, but now this is the thing which we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot. So does anybody understand what it means by lot? Going up by lot?
Numbers.
What's that?
In Numbers.
Well, that's what I'm asking. You know, what is it? Yeah, we're talking about lot, going up by lot. Does anybody know what that means, right?
Isn't it sort of like, I don't know, drawing straws or like rolling dice or something?
No, that's like drawing lots or whatever. But this is about the idea essentially by tribe. Okay, so they're going to by lot. The idea is that they're going to go. If you look down a little bit by verse 18. This is when Israel goes to Bethel and they inquire of the Lord. It said, who shall go first for us to battle against the sons of Benjamin? Then the Lord said, Judah shall go up first. So the idea of these different tribes will go up. In other words, we're not just all going to sort of just, go up all at once. We're going to essentially send tribes to go up. So in other words, Judah will be the first one selected. Judah is going to essentially lead, and the rest of the tribes are going to come after them. So this is really more like sort of the idea of an organized military attack versus all of your 400,000 men sort of attacking all at the same time. And then they are talking a little bit about military logistics in verse 10. They realize we've got 400,000 men. What we need to do is pull some of these men and have them sort of support the rest of the men. In other words, we're going to put them in a support role. And so the idea is of the 400,000, we're going to take 40,000 of these men, and they're going to be assigned to food service and support of the rest of the troops going into battle, which makes a lot of sense because when you're fighting and you got troops going out there, the idea is you need somebody to sort of take care of the troops, and that's what they're going to do. And really, he says here that they may, at the end of verse 10, that they may punish them, about those who are guilty of this evil to the Levite for all the disgraceful acts that they have committed in Israel. And this really has to do, according to Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew English Lexicon, it says of disgraceful sins, disgraceful folly, especially of sins of unchastity. And then verse 11 says, thus all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, united as one man. In other words, they're coming together. They're going to punish the city. They're going to give them a chance to give up the bad guys before that, but they're essentially ready. If they don't get those men, they're going to attack the city. Okay, any thoughts or questions about that? We'll go on to 12 through 16. Brother Timothy, would you like to read that, please? 12 through 16.
And the tribes of Israel sent through all the tribe of Benjamin, saying, what evil is this that has taken place among you? Now therefore give up the men, the worthless fellows in Gibeah, that we may put them to death, and purge evil from Israel. But the Benjamites would not listen to the voice of their brothers, the people of Israel. Then the people of Benjamin came together out of the cities of Gibeah to go out to battle against the people of Israel. And the people of Benjamin mustered out of their cities on that day 36,000 men who drew the sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, who mustered 700 chosen men. 16. Among all these were 700 chosen men, who were left-handed, everyone could sling a stone at a head and not miss.
Okay, okay, so now they've come there, they're demanding from the tribe of Benjamin really accountability for what's happened to this man, man traveling through their community, and they really just want accountability. They don't want to fight the whole tribe of Benjamin, they just want the bad guys. So essentially, we want you to give us these bad guys because essentially they're going to reap what they've sown. That's what comes out in verse 13. Now then, deliver up the men, the worthless fellows in Gibeah, that we may put them to death. In other words, there shouldn't be a problem here. This is justice. They're responsible for killing this man's wife, and we want to see them brought to justice. But this situation doesn't happen the way that it should. What was the answer of the sons of Benjamin? Verse 13.
And they didn't respond.
They wouldn't listen to the voice. In other words, they weren't going to do it. In other words, we're not turning them over. Which, if we look at the situation, is it's essentially going to go from bad to worse. Because now you're protecting the guilty and you're robbing the victim of justice. So why they would choose to do this, we can only sort of guess at, but the idea seems to be maybe it's just a prideful thing. In other words, you're not going to come in here and you're not going to tell us what we're going to do. We're going to tell you how it is, and we're not going to turn these men over to you. And so all of the events that are going to happen in chapter 20 and 21 are a direct result of them essentially really trying to prevent justice from happening. The whole tribe is going to be greatly harmed as a result of that. And they just made this grave mistake on their part that they would not comply with the demands of the sons of Israel. Let's see here. We had here 16. Okay. It says the sons of Israel gathered from the cities to Gibeah to go out to battle against the sons of Israel. So here this makes us think about the situation, why Benjamin would initiate the action of gathering men together in their territory to go to battle against the sons of Israel. Why would they do this?
Well, I was just going to say, you would think that the sons of Benjamin would be like, we're one tribe and
Yeah.
we've got 11
Yeah.
that are going to have a way bigger army. Why do we want to?
Yeah, isn't this sort of like a death wish? I
Yeah,
mean, like
yeah.
somebody would step on and say, let's just give them these guys.
Yeah,
They shouldn't
yeah.
have done it. They're bad. Let's turn them over. And somebody doesn't say, size it up and say, you see all these men out here? They're going to come and get these men. Whether we give them to them intentionally, they're going to come and get them anyway.
It's going to cost them more choosing this path than going down a simple
Yeah.
one of just giving them the men.
Yeah, like they're gonna, so we see the numbers, in verse 15 and verse 16. I mean, they got 2,700 compared to 400,000. I mean, somebody doesn't say, in Benjamin saying, I think this is a real bad idea, saying no to these guys. Where was the voice of reason, we might say? Where is the voice of reason? Verse 15, the author of Judges writes is from the cities. On that day, the sons of Benjamin were numbered 26,000 who drew the sword, besides inhabitants of Gibeah, which were numbered 700 choice men. So we're talking about, we call elite troops. They're skilled. When verse 16 brings it out, they're seasoned warriors. And verse 16 says that they were left-handed. And this seems maybe like an odd thing to say. Who cares if they're left-handed, right? As long as they can draw a sword and fight. But it seems to be kind of an anomaly. In other words, people are most people are normally right-handed. So the idea that you'd get from one place 700 men and they're all lefties, it's kind of an unusual thing. And so I suppose that's why that's being noted. But I like how he says here in verse 16, he says, each one could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. We're talking about precision and accuracy.
They're like the snipers.
Yeah. So if you've ever watched like the trouble earlier on with modern day Israelis and the Palestinians or whatever, a lot of times Palestinians, when the Israelis are driving their armored vehicles, whatever, they use these slings, and they got a stone in there, and they can get pretty accurate in trying to, to use that as an instrument. We're surprised by that. This is sort of ancient technology, but the idea that you could use that to a situation where you could have that kind of accuracy that the Bible writers said, these guys would use the slings, and they could do a lot of damage. You hit somebody with that, you hit them in the right place, and you're going to kill them. Yeah. So it is kind of an amazing thing that they're able to do this, and yet, even though you've got really these 700 elite troops, you only got 26,700 compared to 400,000, and so that's not good odds. It's not good odds at all. There's no questions about that. Let's do 17 and 18. Brian, you want to read 17 and 18?
Yep.
I think that's about all we'll have time for tonight.
And the men of Israel, apart from Benjamin, mustered 400,000 men who drew the sword. All these were men of war. For the people of Israel rose and went up to Bethel and inquired of God, who shall go up first us to fight against the people of Benjamin? And the Lord said, Judah shall go up first.
Okay, so what we're having now here is an unfortunate circumstance that may help explain some of the things that are going to happen here, but what we've got here is really a terrible time in Israel's history. Think about this. Israel's enemies have always been like Canaanites, people that were Gentiles, and essentially what we're talking about here is pretty much a civil war. This is not just sort of some local skirmish, but the idea that, we have essentially Israelites that are going to fight other Israelites, and a lot of people are going to die, and so this is what's taking place here. And so they say in verse 18 that they went up to Bethel to inquire of the Lord, and they're interested from really the Lord answering the question about who should go up first against the sons of Benjamin, to which the Lord answers Judah. But this becomes interesting because they went up to Bethel to inquire of the Lord. So the idea is the tabernacle is the place that holds the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is a sort of visual representation of God's presence, but that's in Shiloh. So why is the author saying they went up to Bethel if the tabernacle is in Shiloh? And so I want to look at a couple verses here and then sort of give an explanation here. Back in Judges 18, verses 30 and 31, it's going to bring this out. It says, the sons of Dan set up for themselves a graven image, and Jonathan the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. Verse 31, so they set up for themselves Micah's graven image, which he had made. And then the author says, all the time that the house of God was at Shiloh. We're talking about the tabernacle. And then in Judges 20, verse 27, it says, the sons of Israel inquired of the Lord, for the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days. And so what we're talking about is something in which you got to remember that the tabernacle was a portable house of God. And it could be moved, unlike when David builds a temple later. That structure stays in Jerusalem, and that's the only place it goes. So the sons of Israel had assembled initially in Mizpah, Judges 20, verse 1. Shiloh was about 7 miles north of Mizpah. However, Bethel was only 2 miles north of Mizpah. And so the idea is that they moved the tabernacle temporarily to Bethel. And that's what Albert Barnes writes in his commentary, Barnes notes. He says, it is not unlikely that though Shiloh was the chief residence of the ark, yet the tabernacle, being movable, was either at stated times or at occasions required moved to where the judge resided. or the congregation assembled. On the present occasion, the ark may have been moved to Bethel for the convenience of proximity to the great national council of Mizpah, which is kind of interesting, especially when what we heard of Micah and the idea of the idols and stuff. I mean, Micah lived fairly close to where Shiloh was, yet they made these household idols. And so now we're talking about other people in Israel, and they're actually interested in going to the tabernacle and consulting, the Lord. And so that's why the tabernacle has been moved to Bethel. Any questions about that? At least temporarily. So they are going to consult the Lord here, and the Lord says that Judah shall go up first. Now you have to remember this, because as we read through this, they're going to go up against Benjamin and they're going to be defeated. But here we have the Lord saying, well, Judah shall go up first. And essentially they are intent on attacking the Benjaminites in order to get this justice. In seeking an answer from the Lord indicates his choice of the tribes is going to be Judah, and perhaps the nature of the inquiry should have been, for at least from the sons of Israel, are we really in good standing with the Lord? In other words, they're going to suffer a couple of defeats, and the idea is that it seems like they've already decided the action that they should take, and they really don't have really taken the time. It's like, is this what we should do in order to get justice? They just sort of decided to do it. And so that's where we're going to have to leave it tonight. They're going to go up against Benjamin. They're going to lose twice before they win. Is there any comments or questions before we finish tonight? Okay, if not, I want to thank those who watched the video, and Lord willing, a week from today we'll have another installment of Judges chapter 20. God bless you.